Hi, in this video tutorial, I will show you how you can test your newly created database. In the previous video tutorial, we created a database, and now in this tutorial, we will create a sample user that we will add to our database. The code that we need to create the sample user, we are going to add it between our seed method within the configuration.cs file. And then we will run the update database command which will run the code between our seed methods. And when the code is run, the user will be created and added to our database. Now let's go ahead and create this sample user. To create the sample user, I'm going to create a variable called as manager. This variable is basically going to help me to manage my application user. So therefore, this variable will be of type user manager. So user manager is basically present within Microsoft ASP.NET Identity. And what user manager class does is it provides us with some methods and properties that we need to manage our application users within our membership website. We need to specify when we create the instance of user manager on what class we are going to use the user manager. We are going to use the user manager on our application user class, which inherits from identity user. Then we need to call the constructor of our user manager class. Now you see this squiggly line because the constructor of a user manager class requires us to pass a parameter that is of type user store. It needs to implement an interface of type user store. User store has many interfaces. One of them is iUser store. Don't worry at this point what user store is, because as we proceed within these tutorials, I will explain to you everything about user store and user manager. For now, we are just writing some sample code to create a sample user. So we don't want to get into details at this point because it will be very confusing. So let's just write a sample code and quickly create a user to see if our database is connected and working properly. So we need to create a new instance of user store within our parameters. And the user store requires us once again to pass the class of our users. Then we need to call the constructor, and the constructor we need to specify the connection where we need to go and create this user, the database connection. So it needs an object of DB context. In our class, I'm going to provide our application DB context, the class that will help us connect with our database. We see this squiggly line because we don't have any connection yet. So we need to create a new instance of application DB context. And when the new instance is created, it will be calling the base constructor, which has the parameter default connection, which will connect to a default connection class to the database ASP.NET Identity that we mentioned in our connection string. Now, so we have created a variable that will hold our manager to manage our application user, but we would also need to provide some user related properties when we create the user, because we have specified that we need the first name is required, the date when they joined is required, the email is required, the level is required. So we need to provide those properties, because in case if we don't provide those properties, we are going to get an error while creating the user. Okay, so variable user will have a new instance of our application user, and a new instance of application user will contain some properties. First will be the username, because ASP.NET Identity requires us to provide a username is equal to, should be comma here, I'm just going to specify something like tech ID, and then I'm going to specify first name because it is also required. Then last name, which is also required. I'm going to specify the email for the user. My email is going to be techhowdy@mail.com, and then I need to provide the user level because this is also a required property. It's a byte, so one. Later we can discuss on what are the different levels, like one for administrator, two for manager, and so on. But now just leave it one because we're not getting into details. And the date that the user joined, and it's today's date, time, dot, the now property. So we have created the sample properties and it assigned it to our user variable. We have created the application user manager and assigned it to the manager variable. Now let's tell our manager to create this user. Now we need to add one more property, and we will use the extension method or extension method with for the manager.create, and it takes two parameters. One is the user and the second is the password, because the password also is necessary when we create a users. So you can specify the password as string, so specify any password here. Well, that's it. Now let's go ahead and enter the update database command in package manager console and hit enter. So the seeding is done and seed method is run. And if you go and open your database table in SQL Management Studio and select the top 200 rows and then execute the SQL, you will see that there is something called as Tech Howdy. That's the first and last name. That's the user that we created. The ID was automatically generated by ASP.NET Identity. And then we have a user level one, the date and time when he joined. And also we have email that we provided. And the properties that we didn't use are basically added as null. In case if we had used phone number and provided the phone number, we could see a phone number here. So that's it. Our database has been connected and working fine with our application. So that's it for this video tutorial. In the next tutorial, we will create our user manager class and we will get to know what exactly this user manager class is and how we can use it to manage our application users. That's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching.